we're just going to leave it for a minute or two while people arrive. But since you're here now, if you want to have a look at your Zoom client there, the little chat button down in the bottom section. If you click chat, opens up a panel on the right-hand side, and you can say hello to us there. And if you're here now and you're waiting for a couple of minutes, then it's Valentine's Day. Why don't you tell us in the chat there, say hi and tell us, how you're celebrating Valentine's Day, other than in this incredibly romantic webinar. Or if you don't want to do that, then feel free to tell us if there are companies that you love. We'd also like to hear that. And hello, Beth, the winner, first person to chat. Well done. All right. Knoxville. Yeah, you can also tell us where you're from. That's always interesting to see where people are turning up from. I am here in Sydney, or just outside Sydney in Australia. And I know, Antonio, you are in Boulder, did you say?
Boulder, Colorado.
I'm in foggy Half Moon Bay, California.
Do I know something about wine from Half Moon Bay? Is that a real thing?
There is a winery.
Ah, there you go.
I don't think it's especially
I must have just seen it somewhere. Fantastic. Oh, some people have got some flowers. Very nice. Now, in Australia, it was Valentine's Day yesterday because I am in the future. This is a completely non-romantic day for me.
Do you want to just add time traveling to your special skills list, Matt?
Yeah, I'm just going to pop that on LinkedIn right now, actually. You could endorse me for time traveling. That would be helpful.
Yeah. We're witnesses. We all know.
There's an Australian who's currently in Austria. Well, that's just going to be confusing to everybody, isn't it? Fantastic. All right. So we're doing well. We've got Greece.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Sonoma, definitely better wine there.
Good one. Yeah, we should do a whole wine webinar. I'd be in for that one too.
Ooh, a wine tasting webinar?
Yes. Feels like the webinar part might be superfluous at that point.
Yeah, very true.
Very true. All right. Well, we're doing really well. Great stuff. Hello to everybody. Again, if you've just joined us, my name is Matt. We've got Antonio. We've got Michael here. We're going to be talking today about customer love in its various forms and what that means, whether it really matters, what the good and the bad of it is, and what we can do with that as a customer service team. So we're going to start in a second. But as I said, just a reminder, as we go through, if you've got any questions or if you have some feedback or if you want to hear us address a particular topic, you can throw that in the chat too, as Cecilia is just saying right now. Throw them in there and we'll look at them as we go through and we'll try and get to as many of those as we can. So please feel free to do that at any time. And we're going to get started in about 1 minute. Okay. How are your Valentine's days, gentlemen?
Only just beginning.
My girlfriend and I we agreed to move ours to tomorrow since I have a lot of obligations tonight, and she's been very, very flexible with that. So I couldn't ask for a better person to be as flexible.
Still in the future.
But it also works because you look at reservations and things won't be nearly as crowded tomorrow. So
that is true.
It's a plus, yeah.
The flower price will be down about 150%.
So much.
All righty. Well, let's get going on and press this button. Yes, so we are indeed talking about customer love and business, and we just want to kind of talk through, like, what does that mean when people say we love our customers or that our customers love us? What does that really mean? What does it look like? And of that, what can we do to kind of build those relationships in a healthy and helpful way and not in a weird way? So I want to learn a bit about it from the two gentlemen I have here with me. And we're going to start by just introducing ourselves. So my name is Mat Patterson. I am a customer service education kind of person here at Help Scout. And Help Scout is a company that's all about really carefully crafted customer service tools and information and stuff you can use to deliver a better customer experience. So we've got a really great help desk product and knowledge base. And right now we're working on this live chat integrated kind of self-service tool, which I really can't wait to see go live because it's amazing. So that's what we do. Antonio, what do you do?
Yeah, so my name is Antonio, for those of you that don't know me, which is probably 69 of you in this room. So I work for a company in Boulder, Colorado named Shinesty. And what I do for that company is I work as the director of experience. So I kind of have the best of two different worlds. I oversee the customer experience as well as the employee experience, which is just a less boring way of saying human resources. So I get the best of both worlds on that. But what we do as a company is we sell and create outrageous clothing for theme parties and events, much like the American flag blazer that I'm wearing currently. So
yeah,
keeps me busy.
Fantastic. And Michael?
My name is Mike, and I'm a support specialist at Trello, which, if you're not familiar with it, is an online collaboration app that teams of all sizes use to get organized and work on projects together.
We are big Trello users at Help Scout too. It's a really great tool. I do not have a blazer like that though. So
neither do I.
We shipped to Australia in 3 days, so we can make it happen, man.
Well, there you go. Fantastic. All right. So let's start, I guess. Let's take the real high level. I have a question for you.
I think he just has a song for every segue. And
what do we mean by customer love? Mike, let's start with you.
One of the things that that strikes me the most is when we get the email from a customer or a tweet that they don't want anything except to say thank you. And I think that's when you really start to see a person that is not only appreciative of what you're doing, but is also clearly affected by the product or the service that you have. And they have a way of expressing to you what it means to them and what you're doing for their lives. And I think that is, I find it especially rewarding when we're able to see those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Antonio.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because depending on who you ask in any company, I think you're going to come across two different definitions of what love is. I think from the support side, like all of us probably are, our definition of love is just we have those people who say thank you, who understand that the amount of work that we put into solving queries is not just because that's our job, but it's because we love to do it. And those people who understand that and really are just like, so much. Thank you so much for helping me solve this problem, even though for us it might have been such a trivial thing. But and then you look at maybe at the finance side of things, where their version of customer love is, are we making money? And that's an ultimate teller. Are we doing our jobs well enough that people continuously want to come back to work more with us. So I think depending on who you ask in a company, you'll get those probably separate answers. But when you think about it holistically, they kind of work together, just from different angles from all of us involved.
Yeah, that's right. It's not a word that has a technical definition, right? You can't measure love directly. Although I'm sure there's probably a startup in San Francisco that's working on that. But when I think about like customers who love us, like at Help Scout, I asked our support team, like, what do people say? And someone pointed me to this excellent customer bit of feedback that said, Help Scout is the Beyonce of customer service software. Like, no, that's pretty good.
That's a pretty high feat.
And I know people love in some ways they love the Help Scout brand. Like when we go to those conferences, and we have the shirts, our beautiful illustrations that Stephen here does for us. And we open up that box, and it's just a swarm of people with it because they really love the illustrations themselves, and they love what that represents about the job that they do. So I think that's more to do with like they feel valued as support people because this is a company that values what they do as a career. So I think there's lots of aspects to this, but Antonio, you kind of mentioned this. There are ways that you can measure, I guess, things associated with that feeling of love or that relationship that's beyond the normal kind of business transaction. So one of them is definitely like that lifetime value, like this customer keeps coming back and spending more money with us. And then probably in your type of business, that's something where people can really develop a long-term need for that kind of product, right? People are always going to update their amazing blazers. What if they move to a new country? They'll need a new flag blazer.
Exactly. There's always a need whether you think of it or not. But you touch it's so spot on. It's actually almost kind of crazy to think about. For us, for those of you that don't know our brand, we are primarily, I would say, a millennially run company. I think out of 35, at 35 people, our average age is maybe 26. So we're pretty millennially run. And with that, we kind of have a really good insight into our customer base, which, believe it or not, actually kind of grows into the upper 50s, especially around quarter four wheels around for retail. But, we're very, for those of you that don't know our brand, we're very brand heavy and brand focused first. And our brand tone is very comical. It's very sarcastic. In some cases, it's raunchy. And we realize it's not for everybody, but one of the indications that we're leaving that lasting impression, especially when people interact with our brand, and our support team is on the front line. So they have the best job of everybody, which is to be able to talk to people. We can usually tell when we're doing our job when the brand tone that we communicate outwards, which is pretty consistent from point A to social media to Z to interacting with us on support, is typically reciprocated back when our customers are emailing back. So they use the same language, they use the same vernacular, they sometimes make beyond raunchy jokes, but that's how we know that we're connecting at that level that's beyond just a business. But that's one of the indicators for us. But you're spot on that sometimes you look at things from a different perspective, and that things are different from one company to the next in terms of how you measure and how you define love for your company.
And what about at Trello? How do you know when a customer loves you?
Our biggest indicator tends to be their willingness to tweet gifts back at us. When we tweet out from Trello, that's where, hands down, almost all of the positive engagement comes back. People who love the Trello blog, they love talking about new features. They always tweet back at us there, and our team spends a lot of time analyzing those results and almost never report back negative sentiment coming from those tweets.
Yeah, so that engagement, I think that's a really good measure. And when customers are engaging in the style that you're engaging with them, they're reciprocating that back. That's definitely a sign. I think advocacy and sharing, when you have your customers who are out telling other people about the product, like I love when we go to a support conference and I can see some of our customers talking to other people, trying to convince them to become our customers. And, you don't do that for a brand that you don't care about, like for a company that you have no strong feelings about. You'd be like, oh, it's fine. And, there's plenty of those companies too. And we'll get into that. Like, should we be is love really a reasonable goal? I think loyalty, last month I talked to Krista from Dollar Shave Club about, they've got a product which is pretty boring, like razors. It's not something that I need very often, let me tell you. But they drive a lot of lifetime value from their customers by just, again, in a similar way to Shinesty, having a brand that people really connect to and feel like, oh, these people get my style and my approach to things. So let's talk about love as a goal. Is that something you should be doing from a support perspective? Like, would it be a reasonable thing to say to your teams, we want our customers to love us? And what would that mean, Antonio?
Yeah, I think if you look at the word love in general, it's kind of one of those big, hairy, audacious goals that could be even defined as lofty. But I think it's something that can definitely be measured upon, and something that could be set as a site for a target in terms of your objective for the support team. We do that here at Shinesty, but our focus is ultimately that big picture of love. But how we define love and how we make the impact for us is customer effort, and that customer effort score system. We've been doing that for about 2 years actually to date. Yeah, roughly around 2 years now. And we have learned so much about how we can improve our own support processes and policies that have paid dividends. And that even means seeing customers come back multiple times, especially after tracking those who have interacted with our customer effort score survey, to just learning how to change and tweak some minor things that make lasting impressions for people. And for us, that's kind of how we define our love is, are we making it easy for our customers to handle their issues? Because everyone's going to have issues. And it's, I think when you try to solve the issue of not having an issue, that is an issue in itself, because people are always going to have problems. Otherwise, we would never have jobs. But it's how you solve those issues as quickly as you can, especially as you think about the connotation of what customer service has, negative connotation for some people. That's typically an upbringing for us. That's something that we focused on very, very heavily here for our customer love.
What Michelle's just asked, do you use NPS at Shinesty?
We do. So we utilize our customer satisfaction metric. We also utilize Net Promoter Score, and then we utilize customer effort. So we use all three in tandem, which has yielded some pretty interesting results.
And how do you track that customer effort score?
So what we do now is we use a third-party system that it was kind of a weird loophole I had to figure out how to do, because I wanted to add customer effort, especially after reading the book, The Effortless Experience, which I kind of consider my holy Bible of support. But The Effortless Experience was very eye-opening to understand kind of what the benefits are of customer effort. And I was like, okay, I want to do this. I want to roll it out. How do I do it without adding yet another transactional email? Because you think about retail, you get emails for your orders been made, your order's shipped, it's delivered, right, on top of surveys, there's so many transactional emails. So I wanted to utilize it to a way that didn't add yet another transactional email on top of what already is. So I had to do a little bit of substituting in terms of processes, and that allowed me to utilize all three via a survey delivery method from a third-party source.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think when we talk about love, I think we often imagine those kind of rom-com type movies where it's all about rushing to the airport or busting in the middle of somebody's wedding to somebody else. And there is a kind of a customer service equivalent of that, of like, the stories of the Zappos person staying on the phone for 15 years with the same customer to sell them a pair of shoes or whatever. These big gestures, or we flew some food to the airport to meet somebody. But I don't think that's a reasonable goal or a useful way to measure, like, are you actually changing the lives of your customers? Obviously one at a time you can make a big splash like that, but that seems more like marketing to me than love. Like, you can't base a long-term relationship on that. So what are some of the behaviors, I guess, that we would expect to see from support, Mike?
I think you're right. Those sorts of big gestures aren't sustainable either, unless you grow your team to enormous levels, right? But ultimately, I look at this like, it depends on how you want to define love. Do you want to tell your team that we want to love all of our customers, or we want our customers to love them or love us? I mean, or if you look at this a little differently and talk about the topic as treating people with honesty and transparency and kindness, that is how they come to love you. If they feel that you're not just a faceless company or a faceless brand, I think that at Trello, I mean, one of the big differences that I can see right away between Trello and Shinesty, right, is that Trello relies heavily on our free customers that don't pay us a dime. And so the support that we provide to them is part of our business. And we treat every customer who writes into us as a valuable customer, and we treat them with kindness, even the people who are jerks. Not that there are anyone like that, right? But we treat everybody, but we treat everybody the same. And I think that sort of transparency and honesty shows to people. And that's what builds those types of loyalties and good feelings.
Yeah, I've had this experience before of with some companies who treat customers in a way that they wouldn't treat their, like, I've worked in places, which I won't name, not the ones you're thinking of, definitely. But places where you treat customers in a certain way, but if the boss's friend said, I want to use this, they get a very different kind of service. And that just kind of sucks. It kills the morale for the support team. You feel bad. And it feels like, well, why can't we just do that for everybody? And obviously there are some things you can't give everyone a huge discount or whatever. That's fine. But it's more about like, well, I would be more honest with this person if I knew them, because I wouldn't steer them to this thing that's not actually a good fit just because it could make us some money. So that kind of like honesty and respect, like you were saying, Michael, it's a big deal. And these are things you can teach people. Like, you can't manufacture love, but you can definitely build into your processes trust and respect and reliability, consistency, and you can show gratitude to your customers. You can say thank you. We've got a really good blog post on how to thank your customers. You can do this in a pretty scalable way that's pretty low cost. And that means a lot to people to say, like, I know I've been paying you this money for years. It's nice that someone recognizes, oh, we have this relationship here.
Yeah, Matt, if I can touch on that just a little bit, I think you both hit the nail on the head, especially when you talk about transparency. Transparency is so crucial, yet there are so many other companies that, I don't know if they're afraid to do it because they don't really understand what the recourses might be, or maybe they just don't have long enough leashes, for lack of a better metaphor, to be able to exercise some of that trust and transparency. But thanking your customers is it's such a trivial thing that you have to do that has such a long lasting impact, because you look at a lot of retailers, you look at a lot of SaaS companies that don't take the moment to say, hey, thanks for helping keep us alive, because you're the one that matters. And that's something we do here at Shinesty. Every single order that goes out the door has a handwritten note by our fulfillment team or whoever's packing that order. And they typically will make jokes or reference whatever they ordered or whatever address might be going to, or its street name. And it's just to build that connection. And that's what sets those interactions apart from constant day-to-day that people just don't see nowadays. But I think you both hit the nail on the head, and I couldn't echo sentiments enough.
Yeah, I think these things, when you say it like this, it all seems doable, right? But there are, obviously, it's not that common. Most of us deal with a lot of companies that we don't love in any way, and sometimes that's fine if it's a transactional relationship. I don't need to love my electricity provider. Literally all they need to do is keep providing me electricity and I will keep paying the money. That's fine. I don't need a connection with them. But there are some other things where it would be helpful. Like if I felt a more trusting relationship with something which is really critical to how I get something done or how I solve some major problem in my life. But what do you think stops teams, maybe your own team at times or other companies you've worked with, what stops them from being able to do those things, that respect and gratitude and thankfulness and all of that stuff? Mike.
I think Antonio just really he mentioned this a minute ago, and I think he's absolutely right that I think a lot of teams don't feel that they have any empowerment and don't think that they are able to, let's just say, be honest. A really good example for me is that when Trello is very popular for making feature suggestions, as with most platforms, I think. And I really like to make a big point of if we're genuinely not gonna do a thing that you're asking for, I'd like to be able to tell you why that is, because there probably is a reason. And I think that it's important for you to know that. There are so many factors that build into me being able to give them that information. And a lot of teams might not have that. Maybe you don't have developers that are quite as forthcoming. Maybe you just maybe nobody in support leadership or company leadership has told you that that's fine. You are cool to make a decision and you go with it. And that's a really important part that a lot of people, I think, are missing.
That's really true. I think that's so often the case. And I've had this personal experience too of as companies grow and the developers are kind of more separated from the support side because they've got more to do. And of features being released without thinking about like explaining this to the people who have to explain it to the customer. And you can just do such a better job of helping the customer if you understand why it was made the way it was made and why the trade-offs were made that were made. So that's a huge thing. So let's talk about kind of some boundaries on this. Like, it would be nice if we could love all of our customers, if they would all love us, but that's never going to be the case. And sometimes it can be, and I would guess that Shinesty probably has more of this, because when you have that kind of quite a strong brand presence, you're probably going to get people who take it a little bit too far, just guessing, but maybe there's some stories there. Let's talk about, I guess, when it goes a little bit. I would do anything for love.
Do we need to just get the list up front of what he's got so we can just have oh yeah, I think it's funny because we often it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we get so many people here, customers at least, who love just talking, who love just conversing, because they see that we're so different in how we do it. And oftentimes it makes it a little more difficult to track measures that really help me understand. So for example, I'll give you a little bit of context here. First contact resolution, right? A very common metric I think you would hear probably a lot of people measure. For us here, that measurement isn't actually that important at all. I shouldn't say at all. It has its importance, but that doesn't tell me the whole picture. And this actually, everything I say, if you probably haven't figured out, will boil back to the effortless experience or customer effort somehow. But first contact resolution doesn't tell me the whole picture, because what it doesn't tell me is, yeah, we may have solved your one instance of an issue, but what happens if you've had other issues come up after that one issue? That first contact resolution has been what's recorded, but that doesn't tell me if you've had to continue to call back or email in, because that issue isn't really solved in other aspects. So what I look at instead of first contact resolution is our reopen ticket rate. And that actually gives me a little better indication of, are people having to recontact us for the same issue? Is it a different step in the problem that they're having, that they're now encountering this issue that we could have solved previously? The challenge with that with us is that people naturally want to just talk to us. So the reopen ticket rate sometimes gets very convoluted because it's just a lot of conversation. And that makes it difficult sometimes, especially when we get to Q4, where everything is magnified. Order volume is magnified, or traffic is, everything is magnified. So we don't necessarily have the time that we did in quarters 1, 2 to 3 to have that same level of a deep connection. And the challenge with that is sometimes we have to cut things just a little bit more short, but that doesn't mean we get rid of the experience that they know and love. We still interact, we banter with them, but then we're just a little more quick to close that ticket if we know that issue has been solved, as well as the next potential issue they're more likely to have has also been solved. I can fortunately say we haven't really had any negative experiences where we've ever had to get a restraining order with a customer or anything of the sort. But don't worry, it's still early. That could happen at some point. God forbid it doesn't.
There is some risk, I think, of the customer that really loves you turning into the customer that really hates you. Like, it's just more likely than the customer who doesn't really care. Like, they're probably just going to remain in their apathy. But there, you can sometimes move away. Like, I've had that experience in a previous company where the product just had a very specific core of customers, and then over time that product is developing in a direction which doesn't really match where those customers want to go. Which, these things happen, but the people who really love you are the ones who are kind of hurt most by that, because they don't understand, like, oh, you were so perfect for me, but now you're looking at other people, and I'm over here like a meme looking at me. And that can be hard. Like, it's sort of like a little breakup of being able to say, look, you're still great, but we're just building it for these other people now. And that can be a difficult transition to make. I wanted to jump back into there's a couple of questions in here from our fine chat folk. Is your support desk phone or email driven? So for Help Scout, there's a lot of email, only a very little bit of phone and some chat. For Trello?
For Trello, it is currently primarily email driven. We will do phone calls for our enterprise customers if they ask for it. But right now we're focusing on email support.
And Shinesty?
For us, it's interesting. We just changed that a little bit. For 2 years, we did telephony and email. However, after seeing the scale and size of just managing telephones in general, which I've always been an advocate against, but we actually ended up turning our phones off. But it worked for us because we were able to make a brand play out of it, kind of similar to what Cards Against Humanity does, where we kind of make fun of people lightly when they call. But we also direct them to the channels that are going to help. So we give them live chat as well as email, and obviously response times, and those are pretty pivotal to make sure that can stay afloat. So
there's a little bit of context for the rest of the conversation. This is how we mostly work, is with email. So there's questions there. How do you express that sentiment when the support desk is email driven, and how would you say something isn't going to be included in the software? So I think these are related questions talking about that thing I brought up of the support being able to explain kind of the why behind decisions. And I can give you an example. Excuse me. Give you an example from my experience. So we had a product, an email marketing product. This is at my last job, and we took away certain features from the product and released a new update to this email editor. And it was really nice, but it was confusing, and it did take away some functionality that people had before. And so how we had that discussion, and this was over email, was we had our designer sit down with the support team and kind of talk through, this is what I've done, this is what I've changed, I've taken these things away, and here's why I did it. I did it because by taking that away, that allows us the capacity to build this next step. We rebuild the foundations, and that allows us to get to this point over here, which is where we're going to eventually end up. And we could not have done that from where we were before. So we had to take it away in order to allow that. All right? And having that background and having that information in the support team's head just means that the conversation turns from, oh, I'm really sorry. Like, this is the habit of a support person. I'm really sorry, that sucks. I'm going to pass that feedback on to the product team. But when you know the product team is not going to change that because this is essential to where we're going, it's a different conversation. The support person can go, you can still say, I'm really sorry. Like, that sucks that we've taken that away from you, but let me explain to you where we're going and how it's going to end up better for you in the long term if you can kind of stick with us through this like painful transition point, because that's all it is. Like, it's a temporary problem. And if you have that relationship with them, if you've been able to build that trust over time, then you can have that conversation, they can stick with you, and they can get ultimately to a better position than they were in. So that's how it worked for us. If anyone else has a story they want to jump in there, by all means.
Yeah, I think from Trello's perspective, in my example, I'm thinking of people who write in wanting Trello to do something in a certain way. And if I have context that says, we're not going to make that change, like, I get why you want it. It sounds like an easy thing, right? I think we've all seen that message, like, this would be a trivial code update for you. Like, I understand why you think that. But there's a lot of things that go into a decision like that. And a lot of our decisions get blocked by, say, accessibility. We have our labels, Trello card labels, they all have colorblind patterns attached to them as one example. That blocks us from making a lot of changes to the way labels works. And I think that's a thing that people who don't have colorblind patterns turned on maybe don't realize. And so I think just being honest, not to harp on that word, but if I know the answer, if I know that's why, I will go ahead and I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to explain that this is why. And I think that really means a lot to people. And ultimately, I also frequently tell people, if this is like a deal breaker for you, if you feel that strongly about it, then, Trello may not be the solution for you. And that's another kind of transparency that people really value.
That's the. No, go ahead.
I'm just going to beat the dead horse again because I think it's important. This is actually where I don't think we as an industry give the customer the benefit of the doubt. I think we as an industry don't realize that people are actually okay with honesty, and that they would much rather prefer that than being led on to think something to happen that's probably not going to happen. Both great examples. I think they both hit the nail on the head. And we see this a lot on the retail side. For us, it's a little more of, hey, I would love for you guys to make this design in clothing. Or, hey, I would love to see this item back in stock. Well, internally, we know it's probably not going to come back. So it's much better in the long term to tell that customer, hey, honestly, hey, that's a super great idea. It's not for our brand. One thing I would like to add to that, actually, which I think has also helped, at least for us, which of course is going to point back to customer effort. There is a practice in the pillar of engineering or experience engineering. It talks about alternative positioning, right? So you look at like instances where we have to we're flying somewhere for a conference or for work, but we can't get the flight we want because that flight's booked. Well, when you look at that practice with that agent or that ticket agent, they're going to hopefully, if they're being taught to do this, they'll get you the next best option, or they'll at least give you an alternative solution to what may help you and what you're looking for. Company or SaaS wise, that may be, hey, this feature isn't going to be here soon, or we might not be doing it, but here's an alternative that might help you get what you're looking for. It might not be the best, but it might help you get what you're looking for. For retail, it's, hey, this design might not be back, or it's probably not coming back, but here is a design that looks pretty close. So you're positioning that solution alternatively. You're giving them something else that could still help them with what they're asking you to do or what they're requesting you to do. But ultimately, you still give them the same answer of, no, we can't make it, or no, we aren't bringing it back, but here's something that might work to help.
Yeah, being informed. Like as a support person, there's nothing more helpful than understanding the context of the decisions that the rest of the company is making about things, or the information that they have. Right? You can just do a better job. Let's talk about some boundaries, I guess. And you kind of touched on this, Antonio, a little bit. Like sometimes you're going to be too busy to like get into the fun back and forth with the customer, but also sometimes there are people who take it too far, or people who is just being abusive, right? And just because you are trying to generate customer love doesn't mean that you necessarily have to put up with anything, just as in a real relationship. Have you got stories of like where you've had to set some boundaries, or how you've kind of set boundaries in your teams?
Yep. I think, this kind of boils back to the empowerment aspect we touched on a little bit ago. I think also we don't give our teams enough trust. And I think it's a scary subject to talk about when you think about letting go of the reins and crossing your fingers and hoping things work. I think people don't realize that the moment you do that, there's a level of accountability that sets in. There's a level of, oh, I'm given full autonomy to do this. Okay, well, I'm going to do my due diligence to make sure I don't mess this up because my name's attached to it. And I don't want to obviously ruin anything that I've done. But I also don't want to put the company in a position to where it's something that is insalvageable. So when we talk about empowerment, I also give my team that same level of trust, same level of, you understand when things have gone too far. You know your own personal limit, especially at this company where we see things that are definitely not traditional for a lot of businesses to do and a lot of businesses to say. So I don't know what their comfort levels are, but no one knows you better than yourself. And I tell them, you understand where your line is. When that line is crossed, you know how to make that decision on whether or not it's best to continue that conversation. Fortunately, I think there's been 2 instances where I've ever had to take over a phone call, and one of which I remember very clearly. And ultimately, she had every right to be frustrated because it stemmed back to an issue that we were very new in making these processes. But there's an area of clarification, or there's an area on our site that could have been clarified much better than the way it was. Understandably, I gave her a little more leeway because she was on the right. But at the same time, things got a little more abusive to where I told her, I said, well, let's do this. Let me reach back out to you after I have some time to collect some thoughts and make sure I can, pick up the pieces where they are. That way it gives her the time to cool down, because everybody needs a cool down period, especially when you look at frustration and emotions, or, something's down and you can't do your job, or things aren't working the way they should if you're working with a software. So taking a step back and also getting to the root of why that person is the way they are, or why they're acting the way they are, could help you get a little more context of understanding why they're behaving that way. But again, like you pointed out, that doesn't mean that you need to take abuse. You have a line, you know where that line is. And if that moment crosses the line, for me at least, you have my full blessing to do what you think is necessary.
Yeah, and I think the key to that is knowing that they will be backed up if they do that. Right? There's nothing worse than telling someone they can take a stand, and then they take a stand and then they get kind of thrown under the bus for it. So it's that trust, again, internally, that you will be looked after. If I do this, I'm going to be okay as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a good question here, which I think, Michael, I'll get you to address first. How do you make sure that your support teams are connected and informed about product decisions?
Yeah, that's a tough one because that requires a lot of work from other teams to work together with you. We solve this mostly by making sure that we have a support person on a rotating basis, so it's not just one person's job all the time, but one person from support goes to meetings once a week with these other teams. So like our iOS team, each week they go through their incoming bug list. We have a support person there. Even if they're just listening, almost every week you come away with something new about what's going to be coming up in the next few releases. That's one of our biggest ways of following up on these things, because that way we will hear about things that we wouldn't otherwise have known about. And then you can ask some questions. And every time that happens, you have a little moment of reinforcement for them too, of like, it'd be nice if you would tell us about these things. But in general, like Team to Trello are really good about doing this, but that is that takes work. You have to really foster that relationship in order to get to that point.
Yes, definitely. And so I'll give you a couple of other models for that. So at Help Scout, we have our former head of support, Justin, moved from that role into a kind of bridge role where he's now on the product side of the company. But he's there as like an advocate for both customers and for customer service teams to kind of provide that perspective, to feed information back and forth, and to manage that relationship. Last month's Dollar Shave Club webinar, Krista talked about that she runs the customer engagement team, and at Dollar Shave Club, the customer engagement team is responsible for understanding what customers are talking about and what the support teams are facing, and feeding that into the product team, and the other way around, feeding what's coming through back into the support organization so that they're prepared. And then next week's Help You article is from, I talked to someone at MailChimp who is the support product analyst head, and they have a whole team. So MailChimp is massive compared to Trello and to Help Scout too. They have a very, very large support organization. So they have a whole team of support product analysts who are embedded into different parts of the product. So they sit in on all of those meetings to understand that part of the product very deeply, to provide customer perspective and to provide information back to the support teams. So there's a few different ways you can do that. Ultimately, I think it is about building relationships so that they understand, hey, you know what, we can do a better job if we are better prepared by you as to what you are doing. And we can provide information to you about how customers think about the things that you do, and feed that in while you're making those decisions, so that we can shortcut a whole lot of those problems that way. So lots of options there. None of them are easy. It's all very deliberate, I think. And but I would recommend this article that's coming next week from MailChimp on Help You. It's really good for getting a bit of perspective on like, how does a really big company do that? Because that's the kind of thing that can fall apart as companies grow. When you're small, it's sort of easier to do. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I had a question here. Like, do you have to be Shinesty and have a whole out there kind of persona to inspire love, do you think? Or is it something that any old boring company could do?
Any old boring company could do it. I think it really just takes the right focus. I think for us, it's a little easier because that's what we do anyway. We're outlandish, we're irreverent. So it just makes so much sense that we can just do things in whatever way we decide to do them. But I think any old company, shouldn't say old, any company, any company can do it. They just need to understand, they need to define what love is for them. And that helps them narrow the focus and where, especially as support's involved, where they can make some bigger, where they can lend a hand in helping achieve some of that goal of love and whatever the definition is for it.
You know, Matt, you said at the beginning of this that you didn't need your electric company you didn't need to love your electric company, but I think you really easily could. If I don't want to put the blame on them to say that if they wanted you to, right? But think about at least here we have other utility companies that reach out proactively and they offer you discounts on smart thermostats. They might offer you tips on how to save energy, or they might provide maybe like some smart energy monitoring plugs. Lots of things like that I would say these are totally boring companies that are providing a very utilitarian service that everybody needs. But I would say that this is how they'll all differentiate themselves from each other, right? And so the more that any of these boring companies can stand out and do things for their customers to show appreciation, then that's how they're going to get more customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's totally a fair point. And actually, as I think about it, I remember I changed electric companies once, kind of for the opposite reason, not because I love them, but because I was completely fine with them, except their customer service people or their marketing people, more to be fair, was so annoying by constantly harassing me about like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And I'm like, oh, all I want from this relationship is electricity, please. and they just kind of irritated me into leaving. So yeah, but it's the same thing, right? Yes. Whereas if they had been in a more positive sense, if they had have only been sending me things about here's how to save some money, as you say, like, hey, look, your bill's gone up unexpectedly this quarter. Here are some things you might want to check out about why that might be happening. Like that would actually be useful. Okay. So we're getting towards the end of our time here. So I wanted to mention a couple of things. You can go and look at these things yourself, but Kathy Sierra, any of her talks on and she's got a book on this too, help the user kick ass. Those are perfect examples of, it's not about you with the company, it's about the customer. If you make the customer feel like, I am doing so much better now because I used this thing, or I am achieving what I want to achieve, then they will love you for that. Like, you don't have to be amazing or spectacular in yourself. You just have to empower them to get done what they want to get done. Those are really great. She's got some great talks. Dollar Shave Club, another example. But let's, let me just follow up with a couple of questions here. What's the best place to start to gather feedback from customers or former customers? You haven't asked for it in years. I assume that's what the question is.
I can take a stab at that if you'd like.
Go for it.
So this is kind of where the Net Promoter Score comes into play for us. As for those of you that measure it, that's a fantastic tool. I don't think unfortunately, if your team is the one that's solely responsible for Net Promoter Scores, that's unfortunate because you're not the only key to that puzzle. But I think that is where one of your biggest sources of feedback are going to come from. So for us, what we do is every quarter, so my teammate actually runs this. Every quarter, we do a feedback loop where every stakeholder, I think it's been the management group so far, but every stakeholder from every department is involved in this feedback group where it happens once a month. And it's with the same group of people for a single quarter, where all that happens is that my teammate facilitates the conversation, provides the data of here's what people are saying about X, Y, Z. Here's what people hate. And here's what people love. So it gives you an opportunity to fix what can be improved upon, as well as to capitalize what people already love so much. And there's a lot of things that's come out of that for us here. But what that does is it gives those core stakeholders an inkling and understanding what people are saying. Because sometimes, like you guys touched on, I've said it before, and I think it will always be true, unfortunately, is that customer support will always be at the bottom of the totem pole of information exchange, unfortunately. Because sometimes we find out at the very last second. I happened to walk by one of my teammates' computers 2 weeks ago, and I was like, hey, I should probably know about that. And we end up having a discussion right there. So with that, what it's going to do is you have to kind of help plant the bug in their ear. You have to keep it top of mind for them, because you look at like the archaic method of customer support, it's always been considered a cost center for some of these, for a lot of old places. So it's never been in the forefront. So when you get to where the phases are now, where customer support, it's kind of important that we be involved in a lot of this. So we have an idea of what to tell people and what people are communicating. You have to get ahead of that. So with that feedback loop that we do every quarter, that helps us get in front of how can we help pilot changes, as well as here's me communicating to you what these changes should be per our customers. And then to keep that audience fresh, we rotate every quarter with a new stakeholder in every department. So that stakeholder goes back to that department. They all walk away with action items, and we come back the next month to review what action items were taken, and we follow up on the next month's data points from there. So that's how we do it here at Shinesty.
What about at Trello?
That sounds like a great way of doing it. I think we don't do it with that sort of regularity, but when, for example, like a product team is looking for context about a feature, or they're looking for more information about why people are requesting something, that's usually what they'll be looking for. And then we will work on pulling older tickets for them, older emails from customers. And they've been really good then about reaching out themselves to those customers to just try to have a conversation. Like, hey, you asked for this a year ago. Can you tell me more about it? And if you're not doing any sort of tracking of those feature requests, it's not easy, I think, to pull all that information out. So that's definitely something that can be a little painful.
It can be. I want to just encourage anyone, like if you have a support team, like the easiest possible way to start collecting this feedback is just to tell support, hey, we are interested in knowing this sort of information about our customers. We want to know more, and giving them permission to not just resolve that question, but ask another question. Say, hey, you asked about this feature. How would you use that? Like, just tell us a little bit about it. And this is why it really helps to have that connection with product teams, like on the product side and probably on the retail side too. Like if you know what the product part of the company is thinking about, what they want to know more about, or what they plan to work on in the next month or 2 months, then you can start to ask those questions and be a really useful source of information about how customers think about it, the language that they use to describe those things, what they want from it, what they would do with it, all of that stuff. So there is plenty you can do in a pretty low key way just by empowering the support team. I've got a talk on that somewhere too that I'll dig up and I'll add into the notes.
Yeah, pulling out those sorts of like customer quotes and actual lines, that's really, really useful for, I think, everybody.
Absolutely. So we have a few minutes here. I want to finish with like just giving people some real practical kind of advice on if you want to create more customers that love you, what can you actually do? What you can do, finish this webinar now and get back to your desk or evening, I guess, depending where you are. Let's do some kind of quick rapid fire ones. That one I just said, like tell the support team it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not resolve it instantly. You can have a bit more of a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, you have to actually, put your money where your mouth is and not measure them immediately based on how quickly they're resolving the conversation. So that's one thing. Antonio, have you got anything?
Yeah, I would say define what love means for you and your team, because that's going to really help you figure out where you should focus going forward. And like I touched on before, definition of love for us as the customer experience team at Shinesty is how do we make it easy for people? People have to jump through hoops all the time. So how do we minimize the steps? How do we minimize the back and forths? How do we minimize the negative experiences that people are going to have by saying the word no or can't or shouldn't or won't? So how do we minimize all aspects of that? Automation. How do we give people more self-service so they can solve things up top? Effort is how we define love. So figure out how you want to define that for your team. And that's going to give you a much better focus on where you need to go from there.
Perfect. Michael.
Give away swag and don't be afraid to do that. I think that's a cost that you should build into the budget. Make sure that that's fine. If people ask Trello for stickers, yeah, we'll send them stickers. That's fine. That's people want to show off that they love this product, and so you should make sure you let them do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and other gifts of thankfulness, like just saying to, and I've worked in teams like this before, where you'd say, you got $100 a month, you do whatever you want with that will make some customer happy. Send them something, send flowers to something, donate somewhere in their name, whatever you want to do. There's a little bit of budget. You pick the time when it's going to make the biggest impact. That stuff is great. From a tech perspective, I think there is stuff you can do, like with your help desk. Obviously, from Help Scout perspective, one thing you can do is surface a lot of that information about the customers to the customer service person at the time. So the more they know about this person's history with us and the fun conversations they've had before, or the problems that they run into, the better you can have that next conversation. You'll be better informed. So take a look again at your help desk and maybe your CRM kind of thing, and see what you can integrate, see how you can better inform the person who's talking to the customer. Because the more they know about them, the more genuine that relationship can be. Like, oh yeah, I can personalize this to you because I know about you, as opposed to I'm just generally trying to be nice. It's a question for you, Antonio. You mentioned handwritten notes to customers. How do you kind of scale that?
That's a great question. That's something that we've been trying to figure out for a long time, which I think we finally did. So there are a lot of, so we actually tried a couple different methods, which is kind of bizarre to think about. We tried bulking them in the beginning, just like getting however, like these 1 to 3 phrases that would be the only ones we would use, personalize it with their name, and kind of scramble that around. That began to be too much. So what we ended up doing in Q4 is reverting to a third-party service to print handwritten notes, and we would just flip that over and use it as the stock form where the invoice would go. We would still have the flexibility of changing that per however many orders we decided. So every 100 that went out the door, we would change it to something else. And that's, for us, as simple as just typing it in and it's done. So we still have the same scalability, the same touch, and the same. I can't even tell you how many people would write in and go, love everything. The personal note was such a great touch. And it's the little things that matter. And of course, if you have the ability to do it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a big budget scale. It can be super minuscule things that we've talked about already that just make those lasting impressions.
Yeah, if you any way you can reduce the effort involved to do it, it's the way to go. I mean, and in a smaller team, we had postcards. We just got a whole bunch of postcards printed, just chuck them on the desk. And then every now and then someone would feel compelled to, like, oh, I'm gonna write a message to this customer, put it out there, give it to the person at the front of the office, and those things will get posted out. And it doesn't have to be immediate, and it doesn't have to be for everybody, but when it makes sense, it's a good fit. All right. Well, we are just about hitting our hour there. So if there is any last minute questions, throw them in the chat right now. We'll try and get to those. Otherwise, I'm going to start wrapping this up in just a second. Oh, thank you, Ken. You also rock. It's been a good. So there's been some good conversation in there and some good links today. So thank you for that. I think I've got this song that I haven't used yet. Wait for it.
I was just going to ask, do we get to hear the rest of your playlist?
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today. So this has all been recorded. Might have to remove those copyrighted musical clips. But it's all been recorded. So you will get an email with the information. Look, there's some people asking for Trello shirts. Very nice. Thank you to everybody. You'll get an email with the recording and also with a bit of additional information, some resources that we will put in there to help you do some of these things. Thank you to Antonio and to Michael for being part of this and their companies for allowing them to do it. That is awesome. If you want to check out them, where can we find you, Antonio?
You can find me in Support Driven if you're in there. Otherwise, just drop me a note at tones, TONES at shinesty.com, and I'm always happy to help answer anything I can.
Fantastic. And Mike?
Also Support Driven, as well as the Elevate Summit Slack, if any of you were in there. And otherwise, I have a really long name, so I can give you my email addresses, but it might be a little difficult for you to follow, but
you can find him. Use the power of Google. You never have to spell anything correctly ever again. And you can find me. I'm obviously at Help Scout. I'm in support driven. You can tweet me at Mr. Patto, MRPATTO. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me if you have any questions. And I can tell you how to spell Michael's name too. And thank you so much. We will see you all next time. We have always more webinars coming up. So have a look at helpscout.net/webinars. And you'll be able to see which ones are coming up there and sign up for them. And thank you again, and have a good day.
See you guys.
Thank you.